We are on Parsha Beha'Aloscha, page 774. So we started yesterday with the menorah. We started yesterday with the menorah, and we're talking about the what the menorah symbolized. That's where we'd gotten to yesterday. So the first, before anything, the menorah represents Torah Shabbat. Obviously, light represents intelligence. Darkness, you say if somebody can't figure something out, says, boy, I'm in the dark. Right? Light always represents intelligence. And as human beings, that's the one thing that we obviously need in order to function. It doesn't mean everybody functions that way, but we need intelligence in order to function, number one. Number two, it represents the light, the highest level of intelligence, the highest level of the guidance of intelligence is obviously Torah. So the menorah represents, the light of the menorah represents the light of Torah. Good morning. 774. The menorah represents the light of Torah, and the idea of kindling the menorah, that the Kohen lights the menorah. There are some who say that that's the idea of a teacher lighting the disciples. The teacher, he kindles the disciples. He gets the disciples to produce their own light. So there's a lot of symbolism in the menorah. What we need to understand here is, let's take this a little deeper. I'll take this a little deeper. If you take a look, Rashi says something over here that needs an explanation. If you take a look at Pasuk Gimel, the third line from the top, 775. Vayas Cain Aaron el mul pnei menorah hela neroseh. Aaron did so. He kindled the lamps. Hela is really, he elevated. Kasher tziva Hashem es Moshe. Now here, Rashi says something that needs an explanation. It's the right column of Rashi, slightly more than halfway down on Pasuk Gimel. Right column, it's about 7 lines from the bottom of the right column Rashi. It says, Vayas Cain Aaron, lahagid shivcha shel Aaron. What's the Torah emphasize? The Torah says Moshe told Aaron what to do. Then the Torah says, and Aaron did it. Right? Why did the Torah tell us that Aaron did it? Says Rashi, lahagid shivcha shel Aaron. This is in order to indicate the praise of Aaron. Shelo shina. He didn't veer off of what he was told to do. That's what the Torah says. Anybody would like to comment on that? Anybody would like to comment on that? Yeah.
These consistencies, praise that, like when we do something consistently, we're doing something.
You're doing something consistently. Okay, so you're jumping the gun on the answer, which is one aspect of it. I mean, you should be bothered by the statement itself. Lahagid shivcha shel Aaron is to tell you the praise of Aaron. By the way, somebody once told me the point in the back of the head, all the way in the back. Look where my finger is. There's a point over here where if you rub that point, you actually feel it in your eye. Where there's a point right over here in the back of the head. It's got to be in your own head, though, not somebody else's head. But there's a point over here where if you press it, it's like one of those compression points where they press it for, what's that thing called where they poke you? It's acupressure, something like that. And if you press it, so then it's supposed to provide, it says to provide a certain relief. So you got to find the point. There's actually a point over there. You can practically feel that it's connecting to your eye. So I found that by doing that and taking an overdose of codeine, it releases the higher than a regular dose. I didn't mean overdose. I meant higher than the regular dose. I mean, my normal approach to painkillers is if they say take 1, I take 2. I mean, listen, it can't be that that the margin of error is so slight. I won't take 12. But if they say 2, you can take a third one. You'll be okay. It's on me. If 2 is good, 3 is better. I wouldn't go too high with it. But no, seriously, this is supposed to provide relief. So the what do you call it? And if you mix it with alcohol, then you're really good. Yeah. So yeah, I'm on video. Sorry, I was just kidding. Maybe what do you call it? So Rashi says Vayas Cain Aaron, that Aaron did not veer off. So the question that everybody says, well, why would he veer off? Why would Aaron veer off? We're going to praise Aaron. He did what he was instructed to do. So Lior has one answer that the first, Vayas Cain Aaron, that he did, Lo Shina, means that all the times that he lit the menorah, considering it was something he did time after time after time after time, he never veered off of the original enthusiasm he had. Imagine a guy putting on tefillin for the first time. Guy puts on, the very first time a guy's put on tefillin, a guy's never seen tefillin in his life, and when he's 28, he finally gets a hold of a pair of tefillin, he puts on a pair of tefillin. The first time, there's such an excitement. Now imagine having that excitement every time you put on the tefillin. They've had that. So Aaron lit the menorah. The first time he lit the menorah, I'm sure that Aaron was, wow, this is serious avodas Hashem, or this is a serious way of serving God. And Aaron goes and he lights this menorah with a certain enthusiasm. And he had the same enthusiasm every time. That's what it means. That's one explanation, that he never veered off that original enthusiasm, which is one of the tricks in avodas Hashem, which I mentioned in the past, that our job is that we are automatic but not mechanical. It's automatic that we're going to do it. It's not, but we don't do it mechanically. It's automatic in the morning. I'm going to put on tefillin. It's just I shouldn't do it mechanically. I have had guys who've told me they put on tefillin for the first time. They're chumashim. There should be more chumashim, guys. They're page 774. I've had guys tell me they put on tefillin. A guy says to me, I put on tefillin the first time. I didn't feel anything. What were you expecting to feel when you put on tefillin? Some guys expect to feel the same sensation that they feel after 4 beers. Right, but you don't. If anything, you may feel a little bit of buzzing in your arm because that means the strap is too tight, right? And you're just cutting off circulation, And you might. But if you're expecting to feel, well, I put on tefillin, wow, I'm almost, I'm experiencing prophecy. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. I've had people tell me that when they've gone to the Kotel for the first time, they go to the Western Wall. And I went there and I just felt so inspired. I don't know, I'll tell you the truth. I go to the Western Wall, I wish I would feel inspired. I don't. I'm busy looking at the stones. Wow, how'd they get that thing up there? I wish I was on a higher level. I wish that I would feel something inspired. I'll tell you the truth. I've never felt a good davening at the Kotel. I've always felt if I'm outside, I'm hot. If I'm inside underneath, then it's damp and I'm getting shoved and jostled. And I'd rather daven in a shul, but can I tell you? Some people just either they feel it, or they like to think they feel it, or they want to make sure other people, or they want to tell other people that they feel it. But at the end of the day, honestly, so if you put on tefillin the first time, you should feel, guys, hold it. You should feel a sense of contentment, no different than the contentment you feel if you help a little old lady carry some packages. And you feel a sense of contentment. Whenever you do something selfless, you feel a sense of contentment. That, yes, but you're not going to be a physiological sensation to associate with it. And the trick is going to be to muster up that same enthusiasm day after day when we do the mitzvahs. It's not an easy thing. The day after day that you put on tefillin, day after day that you say the prayers, the same words day after day, saying Kriya Shema, without trying to put on a show for others or for ourselves. Genuine. I'm talking about to feel a genuine enthusiasm. I'm glad that I have the privilege to do the mitzvah of putting on tefillin. Right, that I have the privilege. So Aaron HaKohen is praised that time after time that he lights the menorah, and the Ramban says he could have let his sons do it, but he did it. Aaron did the mitzvah himself day after day. And there's another lesson there that sometimes people will let somebody else have the mitzvah. I'll let you do the mitzvah instead of me. Why are you giving away your mitzvah so fast? You want to give away your money so fast, why are you giving away the mitzvah? If you really believed how much a mitzvah is worth, you wouldn't be giving it away so fast. That's one idea here. There's another idea. What it means that Aaron, this I think is also an insight into human nature. I met a kid once whose father was the principal of the school that the kid attended. So I asked the kid if he wants to be a principal when he grows up. So he said to me, no, unequivocally no. So I said to him, why not? So he said to me, Rabbi, you can't imagine what it's like to grow up in the principal's office. What he meant was that his father was a principal in school, and his father was a principal at home also. He said, I don't want that life. The trick is that you have to be a principal in school, and you have to be a father at home. Can you imagine a guy who's a surgeon? Imagine a guy who's a brain surgeon. And now he has to come home, and he has to deal with a family. Now, when you're a brain surgeon, there's very little margin of error. Very little margin of error. When you're a brain surgeon, it's precision, and you better be a perfectionist. When you're in the surgical theater, you better be a perfectionist. Yet when you come home, your family may not want perfection. Your family can't be raised by a perfectionist necessarily. And certainly not in every aspect of it. He's got to learn how to turn it on and turn it off. That's a very, very difficult thing in life, to turn it on and turn it off. To be able to go And they say that high-ranking military officials do not have a high success rate in marriage. Because when you're a colonel or a general, and in the military, you give orders. And when you give an order, the guy who you're giving an order to, he could speak to you until the point that you say, that's an order, Major. At that point, if he says another word, he can be court-martialed. That's an order. You can discuss it with him. Well, sir, I don't think we should try to take that hill right now. Well, because we got strategic. Major, we're going to take that hill. That's an order. Boom, game over. And if he says a word, he can be court-martialed. Now you come home, and Mrs. General says to you, sir, do you mind taking the garbage? Right? You're like, whoa. When was there this role reversal? I give the orders, I don't take the orders. My father always showed him, whenever I'd go to him, I'd say, Dad, could we do blah, 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 and he'd say to us, I'm just a buck private, go ask the general. That was how I was raised. I'm a buck private, go ask the general. That's how we were, you got a mom to get the, what do you call, find out anything, right? Only except by money. Money, you go back to the buck private. But maybe that was always called a buck private. But at the end of the day, the buck stops here, yeah. At the end of the day, it's a very, very tricky thing to be able to play, to turn it on and turn it off. What do we know about Aaron HaKohen, gentlemen? What do we know about Aaron HaKohen? What does the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos say? What is he best known for? What's that?
Peacemaker.
Peacemaker. What's your name?
Eli.
Eli. Yes, correct. He was the peacemaker. And how did he make peace?
He went to one person and said, "Oh, Reuben wants to apologize to you."
Right.
And then he would go to Reuben and said, Shimon wants to apologize.
Right. And so I think that's an example. I don't think he did that every time, otherwise the people would have caught on. But that's what the Medrash says. I don't think it was every time. So the Medrash says every time when two people were fighting, he'd go to Reuben and say, Reuben, Shimon is just distraught that you guys had a falling out. He'd go to Shimon and say, Reuben is beside himself that you guys had a falling out. Then when the two would meet, they would embrace and everybody would forgive each other. They would live happily ever after. Okay, they'd be friends again. I'm sure that he used other strategies, but one thing that you're allowed to do when it comes to making peace, there's a halacha. And the Torah says when it comes to making, you're allowed to be mishane mipnei hashalom. You're allowed to veer off of the truth for the sake of peace. And Rav Dessler says, truth is not defined by saying what we call objective truth. The classic example, let's say your 9-year-old comes over and says, Dad, I just made this picture. Your 9-year-old daughter says, Daddy, I made the pretty picture. Is it nice? And you say, listen, that thing is absolutely the ugliest piece of anything I've ever. It looks like you just threw paint onto the canvas, right? Is that truth? That's not truth. That's cruelty. Truth is to say, wow, that's really creative. Wow. That's really, creative. It's like what the world looked like before creation. Yeah, that's really creative there. That sort of thing. Well, that's right. You're allowed to veer off for the sake of truth. You're allowed to veer off. You're allowed to actually say a falsehood for the sake of that becomes truth. That becomes truth. Hold. I want to show you this. That becomes truth. So when it comes, I want to turn back for a second. Keep your finger on the place here. Turn back to Parshas Toldos for a second. I will let you know as soon as I get it. Maybe it'll be a slight delay, and I'll wait before I tell you, just to make you appreciate it. But I will tell you at some point. Take a look at 136. Page 136. Here you have the story of Yaakov Avinu. And Yaakov Avinu is now going in to deceive his father Yitzchak. He's put on the goat skins on his arms and on his neck, and Yitzchak is the blind elderly father, and Yaakov is going in to sneak the bracha from his father. So on page 136, if you find Pasuk Yud Tes, Pasuk Yud Ches, it's about 10 lines from the top. It says, Yaakov, his mother, prepares the food while Esav is out looking at Esav is on the hunt, and Yaakov's mother prepares the food. Then the Torah says, Vayavo el Aviv, he comes to his father, Vayomer Avi, he says, my father. Now this is Yaakov pretending to be Esav. Vayomer Hineni, mi ata bidi. Who are you, my son? Now look at Pasuk Yotes. Vayomer Yaakov el Aviv Anochi Esav Bechorecha. It is I, Esav, your firstborn. A straight out lie. It is I, Esav, your firstborn. And what is Yaakov known as?
Truth.
Yaakov is the man of truth. How could the man of truth saying a blatant lie? And not only that, Yaakov deceives his father. He deceives his brother again. He deceives Lavan. Everywhere you look, you touch him where you will. Yaakov's deceiving people. And he's the man of truth. Is that interesting? He's a salesman, yeah. He did used cars on the side, no. What does that mean? Why? How could that be? How could it be Yaakov? And he's the man of truth. The answer is because if it's the right thing to do under the circumstances, and it's the right thing to say under, that becomes truth. They got to be very careful here. Because there's a machlokas in the Gemara. By the way, I just want to show you. Take a look at Rashi. Right column of Rashi, Pasuk Yutes, fourth line from the top. Anochi Esav Bechorecha. Now this is also an irony over here. It is I, Esav, your firstborn. Says Rashi, quoting the Medrash, Anochi hu amevilach. It is I who am bringing you the food. Kama. Esav Bechorecha. Esav is your firstborn. So when he said, it is I, Esav, your firstborn, he's really saying, it is I who bringing you the food. Esav Bechorecha, Esav is your firstborn. What's the Medrash doing with Yaakov's lie? He's showing you that it's not 100%, it's not quite that lie. It's not quite that blatant lie. Why? But he's allowed to. I mean, this is a man who's deceiving him with he's doing, the whole thing's a deception here. So why is the Medrash, quoted by Rashi, bending over backwards to throw in the comma, the Jewish comma? I told you, the Jewish comma. I tell you, there's a kid who jumps into the hotel swimming pool. So the guard starts saying, hey kid, can't you see the sign? It says no swimming allowed. The kid says to the guard, it's not what it says. It says, no, swimming allowed. That's the Jewish comma. Right? So why are you trying to throw in a Jewish comma over here? What's with the Jewish comma? Anochi, it is I, Esav Bechorecha. What's up with that? What's he trying to do over here? The answer is that even when you're allowed to lie, you still try to minimize it as much as possible because the lying could corrupt you. You know who's got this issue all the time? Who's got to turn it on and turn it off? You could get into a profession in life where the profession involves so much falsehood that it becomes a way of life. It's just like you say, a salesman. You know, you got to be careful when you're a salesman because you're not allowed to perpetrate deception. You have to tell the guy if there's a flaw and he asks you about a flaw, you have to know which flaws you have to voluntarily say. You're trying to sell your house, maybe you should tell the guy about the rusted pipes. Right? Oh, how are the pipes? Well, they're good. If you paint the rest of the walls brown also, they fit right in, the rusted pipe, that sort of thing. No. You got to tell the guy what's wrong. You got to know what he's buying. So it's a very dangerous thing. Sometimes you have to deceive and not. There's a machlokas in the Gemara between Hillel and Shammai. A guy gets engaged, and you think that his bride is probably the last person in the world that you would marry, and if she was the last person in the world, you still wouldn't marry her. And the guy says to you, hey, Mazel Tov, I got engaged. To who? To Esmeralda. Oh, wow. Yeah, wow. Wow. Oh, boy, wow. Right? Oh, what? No way. She's got absolutely no redeeming qualities of any that you know, by the way, because she's your sister. What do you say to the guy? When you say a guy got engaged, you say, wow, great girl. That's what you say. That's a machlokas, Shammai and Hillel. Shammai says, call it the way you see it. He doesn't mean negative. Shammai says, call it the way you see it, praise anything. Oh, Esmeralda, she got great handwriting, man. Great handwriting, right? Because that she has. But that's where it ends. And Hillel says, no, you schmaltz it up. Right? Later, make it flashy. Right? And so they go, wow, great girl. Wow, she is unbelievable. Just a terrific girl. Why? Because he thinks she is. Most people who buy something, they bought it because they like it. A guy drives up with a car, brand new car. So he comes up with a Chvesa, whatever his Honda Accord. He said, what do you think? So instead of saying, well, that's probably the worst car you could buy for $25,000, right? You probably say to him, "Wow, that's a great car, great drive, great, hugs the road. It's a great handles, real good. It's a what do you call it? Great car, whatever." Now, if he's asking you objectively because he hasn't made a decision, that's something else. If he says, "I have an opportunity to return this, and I really respect your opinion. Do you think I should take this car or not?" And you know that he really needs your opinion, and that's right. Then you got to tell the truth. They say, "Listen, that's not the best. That's not the best you could do for $25,000. You could do better than that." But if the guy's just a fait accompli, he's just for like most people in life, they just want to be acknowledged. Why is it that you go to a wedding and why do you dance for a chassan and a kala? You go to a wedding and there's a mitzvah to gladden the bride and the groom. I don't understand. Aren't the bride and groom glad anyway? It's a wedding day. Why do you have to gladden them? Why do you have to gladden them? They're the happiest people in the room to begin with. Why is there a mitzvah to make them happy? Didn't you wonder about that? With a mitzvah, I go there because I'm going to be happy. They have a good bar. There's a, what do you call it? Let's go. They got, by the way, in Israel, if you ever go to a wedding in Israel and they tell you a bar in the Israeli world, a bar means the sweet table. So if you're disappointed, they say to you, "Hey, let's go, let's hit the bar." And you go over there and you find some, chocolate cakes, and they just realize that's what they call a bar. Well, we call a bar, but the real bar, right? So you're going to a wedding, why are you gladdening them? The answer is, because everybody in life, part of your joy is knowing that other people approve of what your choices are. If everybody is so happy at the wedding, it must be I made a good choice over here. If everybody's happy, I must have made a good choice. Everybody needs that approval. Hillel and Shammai have a basic machlokas, and we paskin like Hillel. Somebody says to you, you say to him, "Kala noa v'chasuda." So he says, "What do you think of my bride?" Not that he should be asking you that. You can initiate on your own. Say, "Hey, Mazel Tov, I heard you're engaged. What a great girl." Top of the line. Great girl. I heard she's a great girl. My sister says she's a great girl. I don't have a sister, and if I did, whatever. Just say, "Hey, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to do," because you're going to make him happy. That's what it means to be Mishana Mipnei Shalom. Aaron, who was a peacemaker, so what did he do? Aaron was constantly veering off. What's the praise of Aaron? The praise of Aaron is that he knows where to turn it on and turn it off. He veers off when he's allowed to veer off. But when he has to light the menorah with very specific instructions, he follows those instructions to a letter. It's not that, well, I'm the guy who always veers off, so I could veer off over here. I can take my own initiative over here. You heard the idea. That's what the praise of Aaron is. And this is something this is also a very, very constant challenge in life, is to know how to, who else has this challenge very much? I myself learned the hard way. Teachers, educators, because the teacher is in a classroom doing most of the talking, and when he comes home, he's got to learn, and not just come home. A teacher, often in interpersonal relationships, tends to dominate because he's used to doing the talking and not the listening. And I found that this is more true of women teachers than men teachers. Was that a grunt of agreement?
Oh yeah, my mother was a teacher.
Yeah, we'll cut this out of the. Nobody knows who it is back there. We'll just call you Stanley, so we'll disguise your identity back there. But I have found. Hey Curtis. Yeah, I found that it's very true of teachers. And it was a comment that I heard from somebody aside. I heard somebody making a comment to somebody else. And I heard the comment. I have made an effort, at least an interpersonal, because I found that people would much rather talk than listen anyway. And I also read a line in Reader's Digest once that nobody thinks you're as fascinating as you do. But it's hard. And it was I had a challenge at my own house in the Shabbos table with my kids, because I'm used to being in a room where guys are more or less attentive. And I'm at the Shabbos table, I'm saying something fairly meaningful at the Shabbos table, and in the middle of my talking, somebody says, "Hey, can I have the Coke?" And all of a sudden two of the girls start talking about, "Where did you get that dress?" And I'm in the middle of talking, and I got to remember, 1 second, this isn't a classroom over here. This is a family, and it's not there for education. It's there for communication, which is a very big difference. And you got to be able to turn it on and turn it off. And the same thing for every man, when you deal with men, you're dealing with them at one sort of level. You're dealing with a woman, you're dealing with it at another level. My wife just had an issue yesterday, very rare, but she had an issue where somebody got her upset, which it takes a lot to get my wife upset. It wasn't me. It was somebody else. And somebody got her upset, and she was very upset, and I just kept saying, wow, boy, wow, that's rough. And that goes against all male nature, because my natural impulse was, well, I think that you should strangle a person. You know, I was going to give a solution, right? And instead I just said, wow, wow. That's why I always recommend, guys, when you're married, you walk around with a pocket full of peanuts or M&Ms or something, and when your wife goes on, you just pop a few in your mouth, you go, right? Then you're happy, she's happy, and the rest of the Jewish people are happy. It works good for everybody. So, yeah, anything that works, right? So it's a very, I tell you, it's a very tricky thing in life to know how to turn it on. That's the praise of Aaron over here. Now let's take it a little deeper, even more. Why is it that in the base of Mikdash you have different utensils? Which utensil symbolizes prosperity? Anybody remember? The shulchan, the show table with the breads, that represents prosperity. What represents royalty? Which one represents royalty? Not the menorah, no. The mizbeach. The mizbeach, the altar. Because which represents what do you call Torah? The Aron Kodesh, right? The Ark represents Torah, but the menorah also represents Torah, because that's the light. Now, why are there two utensils that represent Torah?
Two parts of the Torah, written and oral.
Correct. There's the written Torah, which is the Aron Kodesh, that had the Sefer Torah in there. It had the luchos, the tablets in there carved in stone. And where was the written Torah placed? It's in the Holy of Holies, totally inaccessible to anybody except the Kohen Gadol once a year on Yom Kippur, where he goes into the Holy of Holies. The written Torah for us is inaccessible. In other words, we can't tamper with the written Torah. This is it. This is the book right here. This is the written Torah. There's no changing, no editing, no nothing. So the symbolism of the Aron Kodesh being the written Torah, it's in the Holy of Holies, out of everybody's access. Don't tamper whatsoever. The menorah represents what we call the oral Torah. Now, what is the oral Torah? The oral Torah is applying our mind to the Torah and developing the ideas that come out of the Torah, what we call chiddush, what we call innovation, novelty. So that's part of our job, is to look and try to find the depth of the Torah with the Talmud when you study Gemara, to try to come up and innovate. What is the Torah trying to tell you over here? What are the ideas, which it doesn't say in the plain text? There's only one problem. There's only one problem. And we always mentioned this. I heard this from Rabbi Schiller Sr., the Rosh Yeshiva of Ohr Somayach. So he said that in the classic example would be chess. When you play chess, part of playing chess is being innovative, right? Part of playing soccer is coming up with moves that are innovative and creative. Part of anything, part of art is being innovative and creative. However, you could be innovative, but it's got to be creative and innovative within the framework of the rules. That means in chess, if you formulate some sort of defense or some sort of attack, it's got to be, if I formulated a defense, but my defense involves my rook jumping over pieces. Right? Well, that's pretty creative, ain't it? You know, if a guy's running with the football down the sideline and he just kind of steps out of bounds for a few steps and hides behind the rest of the team to get around the defenders, that's pretty innovative and creative. But it's illegal. You can't do that. You can't do that in chess. You can't jump your rook over pieces. You can jump your knight over pieces. You can't jump your rook over pieces. In baseball, if you just take a shortcut, you know, and just run straight to third base instead of going all around. Now that's very efficient. You know, hit the ball and run left instead of right. You know, head over for third base. Every ground ball's a triple. That's very efficient. There's only one problem. You can't do that. Okay, hold this for 1 second. You can't do that. When it comes to innovating and being creative and coming up with novel ideas in Torah, that's great, that's fine, provided you don't step out of the guidelines. The praise of Aaron, that he didn't veer off, is not just speaking about Aaron. It's talking about Aaron lighting the menorah, but it's talking to every one of us in our approach to the oral Torah. That in our approach to the oral Torah, we have to make sure, not lo shina, we don't veer off of what's acceptable. That means if you have a creative idea, you have to run it past somebody who's an expert in Torah to let you know that you can't say. That's out of bounds. because there's a certain sense that people develop. When you've spent enough time studying Torah, you develop a sense for what does fit the pattern of permissible creativity and what does not fit the pattern, what's already considered a change. And if you change too much, you end up with reform. Chas v'shalom, but that's what happens. Because reform, conservative, began with change, didn't become with innovation. By the way, one of the general patterns is that in reform and in conservative, the change always was to make things easier. Whereas if you look at people who change things or innovate, since in Torah world, it generally makes things a little harder, not easier. So the first change was a very innocent change. The first change of the conservative movement, the first breach, was that they said people should be allowed to drive their cars on Shabbos to shul for the good of maintaining Judaism. Right? That was it may have been, some of the people may have been well-meaning for all I know. The problem is that the halacha says you can't. And once the halacha says you can't, all of your rationalization is out the window. Because halacha says you can't. But what about this and what about that? That you let God worry about what will be with the Jewish people. God wants us to keep the halacha. So when it comes to Aaron HaKohen, the what do you call it? That's part of the idea over here, that for us, whatever we do in Torah, it shouldn't involve any sort of change. It should involve innovation. You can be creative as much as you want, but not change. I heard about a guy who was it told, Rabbi Gottlieb. So there was a guy, a Jewish kid, was doing a sociology class in college. So the teacher gets up, and the teacher looks at the student list, what do you call it, the roll, and she looks, she sees the name, she goes, she's O'Hara. You're Catholic, aren't you? He goes, yeah. He says, maybe you could tell us something about your religion. So O'Hara gets up and he speaks for about 10 minutes. And then she looks at the thing again, she says, Mohammed, you're Muslim, aren't you? He says, yeah, maybe you could tell us something about your religion. So he gets up and he speaks for about 10 minutes. Then she looks, she says, Goldstein, you're Jewish, aren't you? He says, yeah. Then maybe you could tell us something about your religion. He says, I'm sorry, I can't. She says, why not? He says, because I'm Reformed. So the teacher looks at him and says, well, don't you think you ought to know something about your religion before you reform it? How do you like that for a Musar Shmuz, from a Goy, right? And Goldstein, as a result, Goldstein started searching. He became a Baal Tshuva. Today he's involved in Jewish outreach. That one thing, that penetrated hard. I knew another guy, this guy I know personally, this guy was a really smart guy. He was going to a private Catholic school. And one day he gets called in by, somebody says to him, Bishop Garver, that was the guy's name. Bishop Garver, he says to him, Levin, Bishop Garver wants to speak to you. Bishop Garver is the principal of the school. So he walks into the office, he sits down. This guy's a completely assimilated Jew, has no idea what's going on. Bishop Garver says to him, Levin, what's the difference between Maimonides and Nachmanides? He looks at him and goes, I don't know who Maimonides is. I don't know who Nachmanides. That's the Rambam and the Ramban. He says, I don't know Maimonides. I don't know Nachmanides. So Bishop Garver reaches into his desk drawer, pulls out a translation of the Ramban in English. He says to him, Levin, go back to your people. You don't know what you're missing. Guy didn't know what hit him. He was blindsided. So he started searching. He ended up by, I don't know if you've ever heard of the New Square Hasidim. They're the New Square in New York. There's a group of Hasidim in New Square. He ended up in New Square and got close with the square, with the Skvera Rebbe, what they call the Skvera Rebbe. From there, he went to Ner Yisrael in Baltimore, and he studied there, and he got his smicha, got married. And he told me that sitting at the head table was Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael, the Skvera Rebbe from New Square, and Bishop Garver were sitting at the head table, and he said Bishop Garver had the most nachas of all of them. That's what he told me. Sometimes, you take a bit of a wake-up call. But if you reform it, reform means I am reforming it. That it has been formed and I am reforming. Well, how can you reform something you know nothing about? And I am a reform engineer, by the way.
What does that mean?
That means I have new ideas about how to make bridges.
Did you know that pi equals 5?
I didn't. Yeah, I have different ideas of how to make suspension bridges. Now I don't know how to make suspension bridges at all, but I have different ideas. Is that madness? That doesn't make any sense at all. I'm going to design suspension bridges without knowing the first thing about it, the ones that exist. You understand? That's the idea. That's the idea. Okay, let's go on. Somebody had a question in the back. Yeah, go ahead. Again, your first name. No, tell me. You're Yishai.
Yeah,
Good. Okay.
You kind of already
Ah, that's Ruach HaKodesh. Would you like a blessing? Just kidding. For pay. Yeah, go ahead.
What are these guidelines? Like, what is the framework within which we can innovate and extract novel ideas?
Good. Excellent question. The answer is, that's a very good question. The answer is that in the halachic realm, very little. In the halachic realm, there's very little that we could innovate. In the moral or musar realm, if you look at something in the Torah and it strikes you as, hey, the Torah seems to be telling you over here that I ought to exhibit more self-control. So then that may very well be an idea that the Torah is telling you. Because that idea of exhibiting activating self-control is very much a Torah idea. If it looks like, well, the Torah says to you, Moshe got angry and therefore he forgot. And the Torah seems to be saying, hey, I think the Torah is telling me how bad anger is. I really got to work on my anger. I'm talking about this at a very simplistic level. But even something, for example, the Torah doesn't say anywhere that the menorah represents the oral Torah. That's coming from creativity. That the commentaries say, well, since you have two items, two utensils, one that can't be touched and one that can, and they both symbolize Torah. One has the Torah and one has light, which certainly light is always the light of Torah. So then we're allowed to say such a thing because we're not threatening any of the foundations. We're not threatening. What we're saying may very well be the symbolism that God has put into the Torah. But once you start coming up with ideas that may run contrary to fundamentals of halacha or Torah, that's already out of bounds. That's already out of bounds. That's why you have to, you could look for ideas. Well, the Torah says, as long as the ideas are ideas that are promoted by the Torah itself. Maybe the Torah is indicating here. Okay, let's go on. Take a look at Pasuk. Skip down now to Pasuk Tes. Pasuk Vav. Okay. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe Lebor. Kaches haLevi mitoch b'nei Yisrael. Take the Leviim from the b'nei Yisrael, from among the b'nei Yisrael. V'tiharto, you should purify the Leviim. In other words, there's going to be an initiation of the Leviim into Hashem's service. V'chos elem l'taram. What are you going to do? Hazei aleim mechata. Sprinkle out of the water. V'he'eviru sa'ar al kol besaram. They're going to take a blade over all of their flesh. V'chibsu bigdeim v'hitaharu. They're going to shave off all visible hair. Now, this creates a. What were you going to ask?
What about the beard?
What about it?
That's visible hair, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't shave that off.
Why?
Because God says you should not
Use a.
blade.
Excellent question. Excellent question. How could they use a blade on their entire body if God says you're not allowed to run a blade on your body? Right? What's the answer? Why can't you run a blade on your body? Why can't you use a blade for shaving? What's it called? A brush? Called a brush? Huh? That's why you can't use a blade? No. It's not because you could hurt yourself. If you're careful enough, use what do you call it? One of those creamers. What did they put? They lather the guy up. I mean, every Gillette commercial, they'd go out of business if you couldn't use the what do you call it? Why does the Torah say you can't use a blade? Why can't not why does the Torah say? I'm asking you, why can't you use a blade on your face? Because the Torah says you can't use a blade on your face. That's why. It's the only reason. Well, the same Torah that says you can't is telling you here why you could. Why can't I jump with my rook over pieces on a chessboard? Because the rules of chess say you can't. But whoever made the rules says, but with a knight you could. So the Torah is telling you, it's the same God who says you can't is the same God you said you could. Remember, we've used this example. You're not allowed to marry if a man dies. If a man dies, can his brother marry the widow?
Yeah.
Careful. Can his brother marry the widow?
No.
Under most circumstances, if the couple has children, can he marry the brother, marry the widow? No. Absolutely not. It's prohibited by premature death. But if he happens to die without children, so not only he can marry the widow, but if by the letter of Torah law, it's a mitzvah for the brother to marry the widow, to perform the act of yibum. Right? Well, how can he marry his brother's wife if the Torah says you're not allowed to marry your brother's wife? Because the same God that says when you should do it, the same God that says when you shouldn't do it. So the Levium over here, they're going to be initiated into service by removing all hair. Now, all bodily hair is going to be removed except the hair that is not visible, which is the hair in the armpits and the hair by the male. by the gender determination. Why is that hair is left, yet all other visible hair is removed? Yet the hair in the private areas are left. So what does hair symbolize? What does hair symbolize?
Din?
Okay, at Kabbalistic level, a din or whatever it is, yeah, that sort of thing. In my case, I guess I'm in the state of rachamim right now. If hair is din, I'm rachamim, yeah. So I got, what do you call it? There's one of the guys at the other yeshiva, I was telling them, when you daven, if you have too much hair up front over here, it's a problem for the tefillin. The tefillin doesn't sit well on the hair. It could be a separation between the tefillin and the skull. What do you call it? So one of the guys at the other yeshiva looked at him, he says, "Hey, Rabbi, I see you're really meticulous about this mitzvah." Yeah, well, it was a good shot. I have a friend to this that used to come to my house every time he'd walk in. He says, "Hey, Cap, bend your head down. I need a mirror." So what do you call it? He wasn't doing great. He wasn't a 10 himself. So in any event, hair represents excess. Because hair is dispensable. You can take a haircut. It doesn't hurt to take a haircut. It means it's kind of there, but it could be long, short. It could be removed. The symbolism is that the Leviim who are going to be pressed into the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu should try to live life and remove all excesses. They have to be at a certain higher level where all optional excesses are removed. However, the hair that's left in the private areas is symbolic of the fact that the arm, which is where the hair is going to be under the arm represents the things that need to be done. That means in Judaism we don't go to the far extreme. What do they call the Catholic priests? What do they call them? What's the word? Ascetics, right? They call them other things too, but they call them ascetics, right? Right. So they're what do you call them? I'm just saying, I'm only mentioning newspaper reports, but they call them. There's a life of extreme asceticism. Judaism never says that. Judaism never says that we have to separate ourselves completely. You have to live like a normal person. Even the Leviim, even the highest level spiritual members of the Jewish people, they have to take those things that are necessary for living, which represents the actions of the arm and obviously the organ of reproduction. That's not something that should be done away with completely. It needs to be controlled. But the idea of the complete shaving of the hair, the idea of complete removing of the bodily hair, that's the idea that the Leviim who are now going to be promoted into a more intense service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they have to try to do away with all the excesses of life. All right, Be'ez Hashem will continue next week.